What up, guys? Welcome to the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And today we're going to talk about a topic that maybe, I don't know that it'll ruffle any feathers because it's not really our modus operandi, right? But we're going to talk about whether or not the gi is necessary. I got this question from a young fella named Andy who basically said he's been doing jiu-jitsu for a while, trains jiu-jitsu gi and no gi currently 3 days a week each, 3 days of gi, 3 days of no gi, really enjoys no gi, but he's finding that his gi classes are becoming more like a chore, not really enjoying them. And so he's curious if there's any good reason he should be doing the gi training. And so I sent him a message back. I said, Andy, what are your goals? And his goals right now, he's just kind of doing it for fun and enjoyment because he's in nursing school and he's in, school. So he's focused on that right now. But he's a young fella, 24 years old. And he said, man, I'd like to maybe at some point get into mixed martial arts, maybe do a fight or two or whatever. And so, down the road, that's his goal, is fighting. And so I figured we'd touch on the topic about whether or not the gi is necessary in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and grappling. Because a lot of people have thoughts and ideas on it. And I will share this with you guys getting into it that, my views on this have shifted over the years. And hopefully you guys get a couple ideas to chew on. As always, thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. If you guys have never checked them out before, or if you have been interested in CBD, but you've never used Charlotte's Web before, again, I encourage people to try it out on sort of a month-long trial basis, if you will. Anytime I'm trying a new supplement, I want to see what the effects are. And so I use it really consistently for a month and then sort of back off to kind of see what I feel from it. I did the same thing with CBD years ago. I felt a positive effect from it, primarily with for me, it's more of like a related to sleep, right? That's what I use CBD for. And I've been using their CBN supplement, which is called Stay Asleep, which again is designed to help you stay asleep. That's what the whole supplement's about. And again, they have a ton of variety of CBD products and CBN products and other stuff. If you want to check them out, go to their website at charlesweb.com. And when you look through the website to find what you're interested in, you can then get 30% off the order with the checkout code Chewjitsu30 for 30% off. Again, it's just one of those supplements that I throw into the mix to help me out with recovery. And again, as I get older, that becomes more and more important. And so if you guys want to check them out, charlesweb.com is the website. Thanks to our other sponsor, Epic Roll, epicrollbjj.com. For you guys, if you're interested, I'll be releasing some new rash guards and shorts in the near future, and they'll be made from Epic Roll. I got my gyms made from them just recently. Should have those in here soon. For any of my students, you'll have your gear in here shortly. Matt makes a lot of good products, a lot of good gear. He makes everything from rash guards, shorts, t-shirts, the whole thing. I mean, anything that you want jiu-jitsu related, he has it. Great designs, good customer service, good quality stuff. If you want to check them out, go to epicrollbjj.com and use the promo code Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order. Also, if you guys would like to support the podcast directly, you can check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And when you become a member of the Patreon, there's a number of different perks that you get with that. If you want to check those out, just check out our Patreon, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. We appreciate you guys that are currently our patrons, Patreon members. And guys, last but not least, if you would like to get my daily email and also get a free ebook that I send out along with the video that comes with it called Focus Jiu-Jitsu, you can get that at my website, chewjitsu.net/join. The ebook is pretty simple. It's basically to help people have strategies for being more focused during their day-to-day open rolls, because what I found is that a lot of gyms do not do much situational training. And so a lot of people don't get the specific time and position that they need. And so therefore they have to take a bit of self-focus. The drive to be focused has to be placed on your shoulders rather than simply just your coaches, because a lot of those things aren't in place. And so what you do is you can create more focus for your training with specific strategies. I list those in the ebook. There are more than that, but again, those are some really good ones to start with. I give you 12 different strategies. I also have a video going through it with you to explain it in more detail. If you want to get that, plus my daily email, go to my website, chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. So guys, with that said, let's talk about this idea as to whether or not the gi is necessary. I will share it with you like this. Had you asked me this question maybe 10, 15 years ago, I would have given you a very different answer. 10, 15 years ago, I probably would have told you something that was told to me, right? Like, yes, you should train in the gi because the gi is more technical. The gi will make you more technical, and that there are certain aspects of escaping and learning how to slow things down that only the gi can teach you. And I would go on these sorts of things because these are questions that I had when I was in, because when I got into jiu-jitsu, I really like no gi. I did the gi because that's what we had to do, and most of the competitions were predominantly was gi, and sort of no gi would be the sideshow. And so my coaches would always tell me, yeah, man, the gi makes you more technical. Slows things down, makes you more technical. They'd say it's like they they would say it's like running with a parachute, right? You like run with a parachute and then you take the parachute off and then you're just flying. Like you do gi, you get more technical, then you go to no gi, it's like so much easier. And and the thing is sometimes their claims would be backed up with experience, because I would roll with guys who were like primarily just MMA fighters, and then we would roll in jiu-jitsu and I would just smoke them in no-gi, right? I was like, oh, maybe they're right about that. But the reality was they were just training at poor gyms, right? Like they weren't even doing like really well thought out jiu-jitsu training. They were just sort of mixing everything together and beating the crap out of each other. So of course, right? But again, young, I'm impressionable. So all right, gi makes you more technical. But eventually this became a thing where it almost reminds me of back in the day when we rolled from the knees, when we started from the knees. And the reason why we started from the knees was because that's what I had been growing up around. Now, like in wrestling, we never started from the knees. We were always standing, or we were in the down position. But in jiu-jitsu, when I first came in, we started from the knees. And so what I one day had a student come up to me and said, Chewy, why do we start from the knees? And I was like, well, because, I don't have a good answer to that one. And so I thought about it and I was like, there's no damn good reason to start from the knees. I was like, when are we on our knees? We're either on the feet or on the ground. So this is stupid. Let's not do this anymore. All right, guys, like no more knee wrestling. We're either on the ground or we're on the feet. Just choose one. And got rid of that. And along with the no-gi thing, I think it was about maybe 5 years ago where I started promoting people without the requirement of gi. Because before that, I was like, yeah, man, you got to do a little gi, whatever. I mean, you can do whatever you want to, but if you want to get promoted in a belt, just do a little bit of gi, right? And then I think it was around 5 years ago, I was like, nah, who cares? Like, because I'm already having students who just want to do no gi. Like, why do I care? And as I got older, I started to like no gi more and more because it's easier on my body. Gi really hurts me. Gi, like my hands, people wrapping lapels around my neck and just yanking, people wrapping lapels around my knees and shoulders. And, it's different if someone's like overhook, underhook. I can fight out of that. But like when they wrap a piece of like thick cloth around your joint and you physically can't remove it, and it just kind of creates this constant pulling on it. It just, I leave the gym. If I do like 3 days of gi training, I'm hurt. 3 days of no gi training, I'm tired, but I'm not hurt. I'm all right. And so for me, I kind of got away from it a little bit. I still do a little bit of gi training each week, but not much. About a day, usually, maybe sometimes two. And so about 5 years ago, we changed it to being only, or that you can get promoted by any way you want. Gi, no gi,
Yep.
doesn't matter. Any mixture. The only sort of shred of tradition I kind of keep around is that on the promotion days, when we do these big promotion days, which we do like every 4 months or so, I make everybody wear their kimonos, their gis, because I think that when you wrap a belt around like a rash guard and shorts, I just think it looks stupid. So it's like, it just doesn't look good, right? It's like you got this belt flopping off to the side of your rash guard and shorts. I just think it looks dumb. So I was like, screw that. Let's do this. Let's treat it like our dress uniform in the military, right? Like if you're in the military, you're not taking that dress uniform to battle, right? That's not what you're fighting in. But when you have these big special functions, you put on your nice uniform.
Yeah.
And so it's like, just compete, treat it like that. If you're one of our no-gi guys, like you just treat it as, oh, this is like the big day. So I'm going to wear my uniform, and, you know, much to their chagrin, they'll roll around for a little bit and have to deal with the grips for one day out of like, 5 or 6 months, whatever it is, and then go back to going to all no-gi. So again, I don't think it's necessary. I don't see that there are any advantages, pros or cons. Like for instance, for a guy like Andy, who's not wanting to compete in no-gi or gi, he's not wanting to stick around in do-gi. He really loves no-gi. He eventually wants to fight. All of his goals are associated with no-gi. Now if he came up to me and said, man, I want to do the pans, whatever it belts. So then I would say, well, then you got to do the gi. If you said I want to do worlds, well, then you got to do the gi. But if you're not trying to do any of this stuff, if you're not trying to really compete in the gi, then there's really no reason to do it. I guess maybe you could say that there's some advantages of the gi where you learn how to manipulate cloth. So if you're on the street and some guy has a jacket, you can manipulate that. Sure, that's a fair thing, because there's some truth to that. But is that going to be the are you going to be training for years doing something you hate because of the possibility that someday you might fight a guy with a heavy jacket on?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you get really good at jiu-jitsu, like, is that the only thing you got as a heavy jacket? Could you not just simply use your no-gi against a guy who knows nothing? Because obviously you're probably not going to get attacked on the street by a like skilled black belt who's trying to like take you out, right? Like, probably not going to happen. And so I just don't think that the gi is necessary if it's not something you want to do, right? This jiu-jitsu to me is a choose your own adventure thing, choose your own adventure book, adventure, whatever you want to think of it. And you go down the directions, you develop your own style over the years, you can train gi, no gi, it's up to you.
Yeah, I think what you're hitting on is, for some of us, like training and like people in other, like, physical therapy or whatever, the law of specificity, for example. Like for me, I think of, well, specificity. What do I need to be able to do, and how do I get better at doing that thing? I want to be specific. So, if, like you said, if I am not planning on doing any kind of gi competitions or gi training whatsoever, or do anything in the gi, then I'm probably not going to get benefits of training in the gi. Now, let's talk about something that we were told. I mean, you were told this, and I kind of, when I started in 2008, I was told this as well. Being more technical, the gi is more technical. What do you think that someone meant, or your coaches meant, when they said the gi is more technical? And how would you define what being technical is now, with all the experience you've got? You know what I mean?
I think people a lot of times use the word technical in a way to almost like shame people to doing what they want them to do. Like, when do you hear the word, like, be more technical, whatever it pops up, like when someone's using too much strength. I'm doing little bunny ears here. If you don't watch the videos, you're using too much strength. Be more technical, right? Or you should do the gi. I'm telling you what to do. You should do it because it's going to make you more technical, right? It's like one of those words where, like, like you hear people like in sometimes in the political sphere, like they have like derogatory terms for each other, right? Like, it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, you might have just been kind of a nasty butthole to someone, but they'll call you like racist or a Nazi. Even though you may not be neither one of those things, it's just like a buzzword, right? Like, I'm going to throw this out there because I'm angry at you and I want you to comply with what I want you to do. That's the way that I think about a lot of times that the whole idea of like technical gets used, because most people don't even know what they mean technical. Like if I ask my coach, like, what do you mean more technical? Like, what does it mean? I mean, like, what do you like when you say like more technical? I mean, I don't know what they meant. Like, they just said more technical, and I was just like, all right. And like a lot of times when people say, like, use less strength, be more technical, I'm like, well, attributes are a part of it. And if I'm using a technique in addition to strength, it's perfectly fine. And if technique is so important, why don't you stop my strength by being more technical? Why don't you be more technical? Stop blaming it on me. You be more technical. Like, it's a bullshit argument.
Yeah.
So there's that. My thing is it's really hard. I was thinking about this today, right? Like, it's a lot. Like, for instance, like you get sports like running sports where there is a clear metric of like, I ran X amount of meters at X amount of time. It's very clear and concise. We have this nice measurable metric, lifting weights, poundage, how much do you weigh? How much do you lift? We have these nice metrics. For jiu-jitsu, it's very hard. And combat sports in general, it's very hard to like quantify how good someone is, right? Especially across decades. Because, there's always these arguments of like, man, could Muhammad Ali beat Mike Tyson? And like, who knows? Like, we don't know. Like we've never seen those two in their prime in the ring, like that. We don't know what that looks like. And with jiu-jitsu, it's like, is Roger Gracie the GOAT? Is Gordon Ryan the GOAT? Right? Like, there's all these arguments. Is Marcelo Garcia the GOAT?
Mm.
And you don't have clear metrics. You have their performances in competition, right? But you don't have clear metrics as to, well, like, how good are they? How technical are they? You look at how they performed and like you base something off of that, but you don't, like, there's no quantifiable, like, number that you can replace to that. So it's really hard sometimes to talk about how technical someone is. But when I think of technical ability, it comes down to application, your applicable skill, or your ability to transfer it so that is applicable to someone else. So as an example, let's say that you had two grapplers. Let's say they had kind of equal number of experience, whatever, they're similarly skilled.
Mm-hmm.
One person has like a handful of techniques and they've absolutely mastered them to the point where nobody can stop them from doing those handful of techniques. Now, their game's not expansive. They don't have some massive game. They don't have crazy complex jiu-jitsu. It's very simple, but they do these like handful of simple things and you just can't stop it, right?
Yeah.
Roger Gracie's kind of an example of that, if you want. The other person has, like, this other grappler has tons of techniques. I mean, they are just a walking encyclopedia of jiu-jitsu knowledge. They know all these terms. If you go up and talk to them, they'll tell you about these obscure guard positions you've never heard of. They'll show you 6 ways to like wrap a lapel knot around someone's ankle and put them into some sort of like weird submission, the whole deal. But when they roll, the guy with less stuff just mops them up on the floor with his basic game that he's mastered versus like the guy who's spread out. I would consider the other person, the more simple person, the more technical of the two. Because to me, it gets down to this illusion of knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you see this a lot in a world where people have like a superficial knowledge of a ton of stuff. You're being basically bombarded with so much information that you have like this you have a really wide superficial knowledge. Like, people know a lot of random stuff now that they never knew before, right? From social media, from YouTube, whatever. But the knowledge is very wide. It's very shallow, right? Like, they don't know much about it. Especially when you get into jiu-jitsu, you haven't really learned it. And so when it comes to jiu-jitsu, I think what's more important is a deeper working knowledge and have truly learned it. And when I say learn it, I mean, if we're talking about you, the person, you're using it to the point where it's almost a reflex, where it's just like you don't have to think, it's just a part of you. And then if you're a coach who's transferring it to someone else, you have this working knowledge of both how to make it that way for someone else and then how to transfer that knowledge in such a simple and effective way that the person can absorb it, right? But so I think those are key sort of things to look for as far as technicality and person's technical abilities. But I think sometimes people in jiu-jitsu want to sort of say that you're technical, like somehow you're going to roll with someone and you're using almost no strength. Like, you're just like sort of like flopping around and somehow you submit people with no effort. But the reality is that you tend to do that with people that you're far better than. And that the closer the skill is and the smaller the skill disparity is, the more physical attributes play a role. This is why when you look at two skilled black belts go with each other, they're both breathing heavy, right?
Yeah.
Like, if they're really going, it's not like they're both just flopping around and just chilling. I mean, they're huffing and puffing, their heart rates are up, just like as if you were a lower belt going with another lower belt. And so I think sometimes with the technicality, so the technical stuff, I think it's a word that gets used and people don't even know what the hell they mean by it. They have some ideas what they think they mean of it. And I think that sometimes that idea of like jiu-jitsu where you basically use no strength is it's a myth that's been shared for a long, long time. And again, it's very easy to use no strength against unskilled people or people that you're far better than, because you can do that. But the minute you run into someone who is very skilled, just like you, who's in that same boat, similar skill level, it goes back to being a mixture of skill and attributes, whether you got strength, flexibility, speed, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm. There's probably more techniques, obviously, in the gi than there's no gi. I'd say there's more. So the definition would be that someone's more technical because they have maybe a more vast knowledge. Like you said, they know a lot of things, but they haven't mastered a lot of things. Like, I think when you're looking at being technical. It's having mastery of certain, like Roger Gracie has mastery of certain positions, certain chokes, certain techniques, having a mastery of those things. And that's very hard to achieve. I think we all try to master a couple of techniques once we get to black belt, but sometimes, you're still always constantly trying to improve and learn.
Mm-hmm.
The only example I would say, if you had a smaller practitioner against like a heavier, more athletic, younger person, and the smaller, older individual wins, I'd say they probably had to use, their technical ability. I mean, because they don't have those physical attributes. So
Well,
maybe
sure.
that would be like an obvious example of being more technical. But then when, like you said, when you have two very skilled opponents that have similar attributes, I mean, then they're going to use what they can. I mean, they're going to use whatever the physicality they can use essentially
Well, I mean, you
to defeat the
take
other.
a smaller
Yeah.
person, they typically are more flexible.
Yeah, they have different
They can
things. Yeah.
move more. They typically have more flexibility, more speed. They're quicker, so they're gonna use that.
Yeah.
They're not gonna if they're going up against a big fellow, they're not gonna slow down so the guy can catch up. They're going
Right.
to just simply use what they got.
Yeah, they have different attributes that they excel at versus like a bigger, stronger person is not going to be as fast, or their cardio might not be as good as someone
Mhm.
that's smaller. Doesn't require as much energy to move around. So do you think, I was just thinking about it, like when you're looking at a gi match versus a no gi match, it's
Mhm.
a lot easier to slow somebody down in the gi, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So you think that
There is a slower pace to the gi,
if you slow
naturally.
the pace down, right,
Mhm.
then you are negating in some ways explosiveness and speed. In some ways you can, right? By the handles, the grips. Do you think that's where people get the technicality piece because you have to slow everything down?
Yeah, I mean, I maybe they say that it's more technical in that sense because let's say that you took like a college wrestler, right? You threw him into the gym. You go take him in no-gi, it's hell on wheels already,
Yep.
right? Like, he's
Yep.
already a pain in the ass. You
Mhm.
put him in a gi, though, and, you're gonna have a lot of control over him. The issue with that example, though, is as soon as that wrestler embraces the gi and learns how to use handles,
Mhm.
you're screwed again, right? Because now you have a superior athlete who has all that energy. Now it just goes back to being the
Yeah.
same, more of the same. You look at guys like one of the most terrifying gi competitors, in my bearded opinion, for a while was like 2010, 2011, 2012, Rodolfo Vieira.
Mhm.
You watch that guy in the gi, and he is ragdolling human beings, and we're talking about the best of the best. We're talking about like him getting a hold of Andre Gavão, just throwing him around. He went to with Buchecha, and Buchecha's like jiu-jitsu prime, and I mean, like he almost won.
Mhm.
It was a close match, and he was winning, and he just made a tactical error. The dude was a ferocious grappler,
Yeah.
right? And so that dude, you look at him, and like obviously there's a slowing down of that the gi sort of has because of the handles. But if you still watch that match, you will watch some very fast passing and fast everything in
Yeah.
relation to jiu-jitsu. And so again, it's it's not impossible to be fast. And so when you take an unskilled person who's never done the gi, yes, you will have a distinct advantage. But as soon as that person learns how to use the gi, it goes right back
Yeah.
to them using things like attributes and strength and speed and whatever else. It's all there. I think a lot of times the issue is when it comes to like the gi and no gi, I see this all the time because people will say, for instance, like, because when I tell people, for instance, that as I get older, I like the gi or I like no gi more, they look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, "You're getting old." Like, "What are you talking about? Old people love the gi." And I'm like, when I tell them, like, "Well, because it hurts me." And then they'll say something like, "Well, I just really like the gi because you can't slow no gi down." And I'm like, "It's not true." I'm like, "You can actually slow it down considerably. It still has a natural, like, sort of like faster pace at like
Yeah.
idle. You know what I mean? Like it's just a little bit faster than the gi all the time naturally. But at the same time, there are a lot of handles and grips that you can use that will slow it down tremendously if you know how to do it. Right. The issue is that what happens with a lot of times is gi players will come over to the gi, or excuse me, the gi players will come over to no gi. and they won't give no-gi the time to really develop those grips. Like they'll do like 1 day of no-gi a week. And obviously it's like, you're not going to develop the handles necessary to be super effective in no-gi doing that. And so they never learn the hand fighting, the grip fighting, and the body positioning to slow it down effectively. And so they just throw their hands up and just say, this damn no-gi stuff is not going to work. Right. And a lot of times, like a lot of gi people, their games are dependent upon the handles from the gi. So when they come over to no-gi, they're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, you'll get the no-gi guys, the no-gi people will come over to the gi, and they never take the time to sufficiently learn how to play the gi game, how to grip break, and how to grip fight. And so they just throw their hands up and like, I don't like this. This is why a lot of times one of the things I will say is that while I don't think the gi is necessary or no gi is necessary, I don't think either one of them is necessary.
Right.
I think it's a worthwhile investment to use each one good enough before you decide to, I'm not doing this, to experience a little success and having fun with it before you decide to, like, cut it off, because the beginnings are always frustrating. The beginnings are always tough. It's like competitions. If you're going to compete until you get your hand raised, because until you get your hand raised, you don't actually know what you're missing out on, right? Like you anytime, like whenever my son gets a little older, it's going to be like, whatever you get into, like you have to, like, we have to get a little success with it. The
Mm-hmm.
success is obviously relative to him, but like, I want you to feel a little success, because I want you to know what you're giving up on if you decide to quit.
It's a great point.
Because a lot of people quit before they get over that hump. And if they just kept going a little bit further, they would do better, and then they would enjoy it. Because like in jiu-jitsu, it's like, you know, your first 6 months, sometimes a year. I mean, it's a difficult set of circumstances in front of you. It's like everybody's trying to play the human chessboard, and if you're a white belt who just signed up, like, you don't even have all your pieces yet. You're just trying to get the pieces. You're spending your 6 months to get the pieces on the board just so you can play. And so it's not fun all that much in the beginning. You're just getting smashed a lot. It's enjoyable to some degree, but it's tough. And then after you take your lumps a little bit, all of a sudden it becomes enjoyable and it's fun. It's like, and if you can get past that point, that's where it gets enjoyable. It's like when you can start playing the game a little bit. So there's some ideas there.
What about so we both kind of, I started in the gi. Like that was like
I did too.
the beginner classes were gi, and then you kind of, no gi was kind of like you transition to that once you're skilled enough. Once you've got, you get a little technique, get a little technical,
You get a
right?
little
You get a little
technique. Once you're a
technical,
little technical.
get a little technical in the gi, and then you can go. What do you think? Let's talk like pros and cons. Is there a benefit? Obviously your goals, like whatever your goals are, but you don't really know what those are when you start jiu-jitsu. Some people do. They're like, I just want to fight MMA. And then you're like, all right, so you need to do some jiu-jitsu in this capacity. What are the pros and cons maybe of starting in the gi first and having most of your training that way? And then the other opposite side of it is maybe starting in no gi and working from there.
So first off, I think a benefit to training both of them, we'll start with that maybe, is that just gives you more options for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
You go to a competition, you can do more matches. You go to a city and you want to go to an open mat.
Yeah.
Well, what if it's a gi open mat? Or are you going to be like, oh, I can't do it because I'm a no gi guy? It just gives you more opportunities to train, right? You just have more available opportunities to do things, and that's great. So I think that's like maybe a case for both, right?
Sure.
As far as like one benefit to the other, I don't know that there's one that like, because it's like, again, I think if you go into it, like, here's an example. When I got into jiu-jitsu, I wanted to fight MMA, but we did like our no-gi, it was like all gi classes, and then we had one no-gi a week. And so I wanted to fight MMA. And so I was listening to, or actually reading an article, and I think it was Dean Lister wrote, like, who was the guy that was being interviewed years ago. And Dean Lister said that he trains in the gi all the time, but he was fighting MMA. He was winning no-gi competitions, right? So this is like one of the best no-gi, one of the best American no-gi grapplers of all time. And so I'm like, all right, so what is his secret, right? Because he's training gi and he's doing good at no-gi. He said basically to have a game that is never dependent upon the gi. He's like, if you can't transfer it over, don't do it. Like, he's like, just make your game to where it's easy to go from one to the next. So if like you can switch a collar grip for a collar tie, in the gi or no gi. You can go from sleeve to wrist. You can go from like ankle, like grip to ankle.
Sure.
But like the lapel, you can't do lapel. There's no exchange for lapel to in no-gi. And so like what I did was I just stayed away from a lot of those like gi specific techniques. So this way it never hindered my ability to switch from one to the other. My game was pretty easy to transfer. I grip
Yeah.
fight a little differently in the gi and those sorts of things, but otherwise it's pretty much the same game, right?
Right.
I can play from one to the next. And so that's something that I would just share with you. Now, as far as like the advantages, I don't know that there are any advantages. I would tell you that I think, and I don't know that I would have gotten this from Nogi, or maybe I would have. I don't know because I didn't have that opportunity. But I will say that the gi to some degree seemed to have helped temper me a little bit as a young guy because I was wild and I was reckless as a little like wrestler, and I would get held down with collar grips and sleeve grips and whatever else. I'd be held down with grips on the and like side control, and it forced me to slow down with my escapes
Yeah.
because I couldn't simply just power out of it, which a lot of times in the nogi I would simply like it would get sweaty and slippery and I'd be able to get myself out of it, right? So there may be a case to be made for that maybe my defense was made better by the gi, but again I don't know that that would have been the case if I had done all no gi, if I still would have learned those lessons, because if everybody was doing no gi all the time or a substantial amount of time, their positioning probably would have been better at holding me down in no-gi. But because we only did one no-gi a week, people weren't used to the slippery, sweaty conditions,
Yeah.
right? So maybe there's something, but like I said, maybe there is something to that. One advantage that I think you can get when you do no-gi training is that you learn how to use your body the most efficient way possible. So in some cases, you can get away with somewhat sloppy positioning of the body with the handles, right? Because like, you can make up for really precise body positioning because I've got handles all over your body I
Yeah.
can grab. In Nogi, you don't have that. And so you have to be really effective with how you use your body to pin someone or to put them in a particular position or to hold them, right? So if you take that body awareness over to the gi and add those handles in, it becomes brutal because
Yeah.
now you've got precise positioning with your body, just your body, and then you have handles that work to sort of multiply the effect. And so there's that. So, maybe that's a case. I'm just sort of, it's so hard to know because I've never done one versus the other. I do both of them. And, especially in the formative years of my game, now I do mostly no-gi. But that's what I feel about that, is that maybe there's a case to be made for maybe gi helps your defense a little bit because of the fact that you have to be so much more mindful of all these handles and grips, and you're not unable to just slip out of things as easy, that sort of thing. And then maybe the no-gi allows you to have better body awareness and positioning and sensitivity that you have to rely on, which then can be added into the gi for, even more effective results.
Yeah. I would say, like, just from what you're sharing, like a couple ideas came to mind. One was, I feel like the gi can sometimes teach you patience because sometimes you get stuck and you just have
Yeah,
to be
you have to be
calm
patient.
and
100%.
patient, and you have to kind of ride certain positions out or wait for your opponent to make a move. I mean, some instances are like that. And then on the no-gi side, I think there's a lot less room for error because you don't have handles. You have to really be aware of where you're putting your weight, how you're gripping, like how you're controlling your opponent and where you're putting your positions, and you got to be tighter. I think you have to be
Mhm.
tighter. You have friction in the gi that can substitute for some of that
Yeah.
tension and tightness, and you don't have that in no gi. So I think there's, I guess, advantages to both, but the one thing, so we have students come in that some start in the gi and they traditionally kind of do the gi and then they'll transfer to no gi and do some of that. We have some students now that just start in the no gi and then they just stick with no gi. Maybe
Mhm.
they'll do gi on occasion. Have you noticed anything, like, as far as I don't know, like the ability, like, is there any kind of, I don't know, growth or changes or anything from starting one versus the other in that capacity?
Man, I don't notice anything, because I've had guys that have been training at this point have been doing no-gi for almost like just no-gi for like 5 years,
Yeah.
and they're good.
Sure.
And when one of my students who also does gi comes and rolls with them, there's no discernible, oh, this is one of my no-gi students, or this is one. They're just rolling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, like, I don't really notice a difference. I would say that a lot of times the guys that are more heavy in no-gi typically have an advantage in some areas like leg locks,
Sure.
um,
Absolutely.
things like that. And they also have an advantage with certain gripping techniques because they're so much more used to them in no-gi. Whereas if the no-gi student wanders over into the gi day, they struggle with the grips a little bit because, again,
Right.
the pacing is different. As you said, you have to be a bit more patient with the gi because you have to fight with the grips a lot more, and
Yeah.
they can create a certain difficulty that you have to maneuver through before you can actually get things. This is like, for instance, like wrestling techniques, like a lot of wrestling shots and things like that. They work in the gi. You just have to understand the gi grips to set them up. Whereas in no gi, they work almost
Yeah.
like they transfer over almost directly as they did in wrestling, with some slight exceptions. If you're doing like things like singles, doubles, things of that
Yeah.
nature. I think sometimes it kind of goes down to, it kind of goes back to your goals, right? Like, what are you doing this for? It's kind of like lifting, right?
Yeah.
For instance, is there a necessity for a deadlift? Like, I mean, there's plenty of exercises to work the same muscles that the deadlift do. Um, is there a necessity for doing the deadlift? I maybe not. I don't know. I've heard people say both,
Yeah.
but I mean, like, the deadlift, it's a relatively difficult exercise that requires a bit of technical understanding, and it wrecks a lot of people's backs because they do it improperly,
Sure.
whereas they would be able to lift more safely with other exercises that aren't as demanding as a deadlift. But the deadlift, if like you're going to be a power lifter, deadlift is absolutely 100% a must, right? But for a person that just wants to be strong and be in shape and have, like, developed hamstrings and everything else and back, you could get away without doing deadlifts.
Hmm.
You could do other exercises to work all these different muscles, and it would take out the potential dangers that the deadlift has for some people. And I'm not saying that the deadlift is this terrible, dangerous exercise that nobody should use. I'm just
No.
saying, like, it is one of the exercises where it's performed improperly and people can get away with relatively heavy weight to them for a while before stuff starts to fall off the rails, and then they start busting discs.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen a lot with people with, like, just doing really bad deadlifting form.
Yeah. Would you do you think if a student comes in, they ask you what they should do, what would you recommend?
How do you mean?
Well, if somebody comes in, is like, I want to do jiu-jitsu. I mean, you ask them their goals and stuff, but you still recommend they do both? Like, as when they're
Depends.
starting out, if they don't have any goals, like, I just want to train jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, just do both.
What are you talking? Do both.
If they don't have a specific goal, I mean, if they came in and said, I want to be like in the ADCC, I want to do ADCC opens. All right, well, then we're doing Nogi, baby. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
Now, if they came in and they said, I want to be in the pans, that's what I want to do, is I want to do pans, gi pans. Well, then let's focus on the gi. If they just came in and said, I'm here to train jiu-jitsu, what should I do? Let's do a little bit of both. Like, again, let's find your way. And honestly, I would still, and again, I do this from not a demanding place, right? Because, again, I think of my place as a coach not to be like, I'm going to put certain guardrails in place. I'm going to make you learn certain things that I think you need to know, but I want to provide an environment where I can light a path, but at some point you have to go down your own path, right? I don't want you to be little mini Chewy. I want you to find your own way in this thing. So I'm trying to assist you in that. And so I will lead more by example, and I will do both, right? Most of the time. But I'll tell people, like, just if you're gonna do jiu-jitsu, just do a little bit of both. Why not do both? Even like, I have old friends that were MMA guys from, like, way back in, like, my early MMA fighting days, that used to just rag on the gi. They was so stupid. Da 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 da. Now they're training in the gi
Mhm.
because they're like, oh, it's cool, man. It's like kind of neat, right? So, like, my whole thing is, I always tell people, go form your own opinion based on your own experience, because in something like this, that's really valuable. I had a student years ago who came into the gym, and he had, I mean, this is like 2010, maybe 2009, 2010 is a long time ago, before the internet being what it is now. And he came in, he's like, hey man, I don't want to do any gi. I'm not doing any gi training. I was like, that's fine, man. You can do no gi. He's like, yeah, man, I listened to this Eddie Bravo interview, and he's like, I'm just not doing it. Eventually he did the gi, and he started doing the gi a little bit, and he's like, man, I really like the gi. I'm like, huh. it's just interesting. It's like, man, just form your own opinion
Yeah.
before you listen to everybody else. Just you think about what you want to do and you figure out what you want to do, but you do it on your own experience. Many of us have had those situations and those experiences in our life where we were told one thing from someone else, and then we either talked to someone, we did the thing, we went to the restaurant or whatever, and we found that this person's negative view of this person, place, or thing was not the view or the experience that we had, right? And so again, with the gi, some people may not like the gi at all. Doesn't mean you won't. You go find your own opinion out.
Right.
And so that's what I tend to tell people is like, experience this yourself.
I think there's fun aspects of each. I do like the ability to use the lapel. I don't rely on it, but I do like playing with the lapel sometimes. It's just messing with people. I think it adds a fun piece to it. And then I really, I like playing with leg locks and I like learning leg locks. It just gives me more things to learn, and it keeps jiu-jitsu kind of, for someone that's trained for a long time, it just keeps things fresh, and it keeps, because there's always, I've got a new way to kind of hit this technique. That's me personally. I enjoy both.
Yeah, I like both too.
There's one I feel like I'm probably better at just because I've spent significantly more time in one aspect versus the other, but I enjoy learning and getting better at the other one. I'd probably say I'm better in gi, and I feel more comfortable in gi, but then I really like doing no gi. I think it's fun, and I think they both can complement your jiu-jitsu if you allow them to. They both can limit your jiu-jitsu, but they can also both complement your jiu-jitsu. And like I said, like you said, make your own path and like figure out what you like. You may be attracted to one, maybe you're better at it, or you have more success, or you feel like it fits your I don't know what your attributes better. So I don't know, figure it out.
There is a book here for you guys watching the video. You see it, Range. And for you guys that aren't watching, it's a book called Range by David Epstein. Good book. In the book, and I've probably talked about it before, he talks about the idea of the importance of non-specificity, right? At certain points, because basically he's saying, like, he brings up this case where the opening of the book basically starts off with Tiger Woods and Roger Federer, two people who were like, at the top of class of their respective sports. And, a lot of people, whenever they're talking about specificity with their children and with sports, they go to Tiger Woods, whose dad had him friggin' golf. And it's like, he's still a toddler. He's swinging clubs. But Roger Federer was kind of like the opposite, where he dabbled in all sorts of different sports. He didn't specify. He was just kind of playing around. And then at a certain point, he then specified in his sport, right? And then the author was bringing up this case, and he goes through the whole book doing this over and over again, where for every Tiger Woods, there's a Roger Federer. There's a guy who didn't specify, who had this wide range of skills that they learned, but then eventually specified to this thing. And there's some things to suggest that, by spreading out into other sports, it gives you these other abilities, these other skills that can then contribute to the sport that you specify in, and then even making your body a bit more resilient, right? Because again, if you get locked into these particular movement patterns and things of that nature, right, like it can make you more injury prone in some cases, because you're just overuse and you're not spreading the wear out on the tire, so to speak. And so it's and I think that sometimes this is the case with gi and no gi, right? Like, they can support each other, because I can tell you that there's all kinds of, like, sometimes concepts that I will take from one to the other, because some of them don't change. But then, like, sometimes, like, here's an example. I got friggin' just completely obsessed with grip fighting, like circa 2012, because I had a Japanese, probably 2011 actually. We had a Japanese student named Mashashi Takashi, and he was a purple belt from Japan, black belt in judo. He taught some gi classes, or taught some judo classes at the gym, and the whole, like, beginning of it was all focused on grip fighting. And I got excited about this because I don't know why, but I'd never really focused on grip fighting all that much in my jiu-jitsu from anybody. We never really got focused on it. I was like, man, this is pretty cool. This is important, because at the time I was like struggling at black belt, especially with my takedowns, because of grips. So I was like, okay. So I got obsessed with this grip fighting. I would like roll with people and just like fight grips and not even care about anything else. I'm just like, can I control all the grips in the gi? Well, that then got me thinking I should be doing this in no gi too. And so I got obsessed with doing it in no-gi, because again, then you get obsessed with like, I'm now taking these grips away and getting the grips that I want. And, a lot of times what I do when I'm rolling is like, let's say for instance, someone keeps grabbing a grip, then I will dominate that grip because I'm like, oh, you want that. You want that grip. So I need to take it away from you. Likewise in no-gi, it's the same thing. I'll like look at whatever handle they have, whatever the grip they're grabbing. I'm like, oh, let me take that away from you. But it was something that I learned in no-gi or in gi that I took over to no-gi. But again, it could have been learned in either or, but I learned it in one, took it over to the other. And like I said before, like there's been so many times where I've found certain little tricks to add more pressure or to control someone in the gi, in no-gi.
Yeah.
And then I take it over to the gi and works even better because I've got handles. And so you can use them both. And so I think that idea of like range, like having a wide range of stuff and experiences to draw upon, can be a really beneficial thing in the end, because it gives you more experiences, more ideas to pull from. It's why, like, as a person who reads a lot of books, I read a lot of different stuff, because it's like, to me, it's like when I'm like, for instance, if we're talking on the podcast or if I'm doing a video, if I have a wider amount of information I can pull from, I can, basically, I have more resources, more tools that I can draw upon to make the video entertaining or informative or whatever it is.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. Hopefully maybe you got an idea to chew on. Some of you guys who are, very into the gi training. Hopefully this didn't upset you too much. Hopefully you didn't get your kimonos in a bundle on me. Again, I like both. I shared my opinions as I see them. Again, big thanks to our sponsors for helping make this podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. If you guys want to check out any of their products, save 30% off the order. Check them out at charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Chewjitsu30 for 30% off. If you guys would like to check out Epic Roll and all the products they make, the rash guards, shorts, gis, t-shirts, everything else, get yourself something new. Make sure you talk to your spouse about it before getting your like 17th gi, go to epicrollbjj.com and the promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off. I'm just laughing because I feel like that's what happens, right? Like you start buying stuff and it's like you have this whole like section of your wardrobe that's just like gis and rash guards, and you train twice a week, but then you've got like 16 rash guards and 17 gis, and your wife is just looking at you like, what the hell's wrong with you?
You don't realize how many gis you have. It adds up after time. Yeah.
One of my buddies, one of the students told me. And also, guys, if you guys want to support the podcast directly and get access to some of the Patreon content that we have, check it out at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. We did an extra today where we talk about whether or not the gi is dying, because that's sort of a prophecy that like a lot of people have made, that the gi is dying. It's on its way out. So we talk about that. Talk about whether or not the gi is on its way out, if it's dying. And there's some other perks if you guys want to check them out. Check out at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast to get information and to join up. And guys, last but not least, if you would like to add more focus to your training and improve faster, then check out my ebook, which is free. It's called Focused Jiu-Jitsu. You get it when you join up for my daily Chew Crew email, which is at my website, www.chewjitsu.net/join. When you join up, you get my email, which goes into anything and everything that I'd like to share with you. Everything from jiu-jitsu and lifting stuff specifically to books I'm reading to God knows what. And then the ebook is called Focused Jiu-Jitsu. Gives you 12 strategies to add focused training when you're rolling during open rounds. This is something where, like, I'm working with a coaching group right now of people doing the Executors Challenge, and like a lot of people don't have a lot of focus in their training. And it's one of the things where if you want to improve faster and your gym's not doing a lot of focused rolling, it's one of the simplest ways to get a lot of bang for your buck and to get more from your training. So I'll show you how to do it in the ebook, and there's a video that goes along with it. And guys, with that said, that's it for the video. Or the podcast today. That's it for today. Hopefully you guys got something from it, enjoyed the podcast. Hopefully it was fun, entertaining something for you, and we'll see you next week.